Welcome to the latest episode of Reset Now from the Australian Association of National Advertisers and in partnership with Nine and MI3. I'm Liana Dubois, Nine's Director of Powered, our Marketing Solutions division for brands. And with me today is Paul McIntyre, the Executive Editor of MI3. Paul, tell us who's also joining us today.
Hi Liana, yes, welcome to a marketer who's been around for 25 years, no small feat in this game. She's worked in New York, she's worked in London and in Sydney. Of course, we're talking about a former CMO of McDonald's and a PepsiCo veteran. Her name, as many will know, is Jenni Dill. Jenni is also on the board of the AANA, the Australian Association of National Advertisers, and serves on the Advertising Standards Board. A busy woman. Welcome, let's get straight to it, Jenni Dill. Hello, welcome. And I think we'll kick off with what a day in a CMO looks like. If you hark back to your days at McDonald's and Pepsi, what does the allocation of your time look like versus in those more obvious areas of advertising, media and communications versus the broader marketing remit? What did you do?
Yeah, I think it might surprise a lot of people, Paul. As a CMO, about 10% of my time was spent on comms, about another 10% was spent on media, and the rest of my time pretty much was on stakeholder management, engagement, alignment, team development. Whether it was with senior leadership in Australia, whether it was with senior leadership in the world, or whether it was with dealing with licensees or customers, you spend a lot of time as a CMO literally doing the heavy lifting and the blocking and tackling for your team to make sure you're aligned on the big initiatives and the big things that are going to drive growth for the business.
So during COVID, Jenni, there's been some talk around some marketers that balance may have sort of moved around a bit, particularly around media and advertising as we start the early part of the crisis. Do you think that's changed a little bit for marketers during COVID, that allocation?
I think what's changed is the length of time that you're actually looking out in front. So I think for a lot of businesses, retailers were often a week-to-week proposition and you were making changes on the fly. But I think now everyone's experiencing that as part of COVID. Some businesses were lucky enough to be able to put their plans down 12 to 18 months in advance pre-COVID. And now they're having to be a lot more nimble and a lot more agile and reacting to both market conditions, but also what's going on with customers and consumers and how they're responding and reacting. So I think what you've seen is all the timeframes shortening and not a lot of time being spent at the moment on the long term.
Jen, you've been out of your most recent marketing role for 2 to 3 months now. What are you seeing and what have you had the time to observe now that you're kind of out of the trenches a little bit?
Well, the first time in probably over 2 decades, I've had the luxury of a bit of time on my hands, which is amazing. And it really gives you a chance to step back and take a look at things in a different way. And I've personally been focused on doing a lot of learning. So jumping onto whether it's Zoom calls or WebExes or TED Talks or South by Southwest or whatever it is from around the world that really can just stimulate and access people and speakers that you would never normally get access to from Sydney, which has been amazing. What I've noticed, though, is just the power of creativity in this time. So it's not just creative as opposed to in driving comms. It's more about creative when it comes to new business models and new ways of working and just the agility that we've seen. You know, some of my local businesses have been forced to pivot really, really quickly to a delivery model or a takeaway model, whether you're a restaurant, a cafe or a bar. They've done it overnight and they've done it with tech that makes it pretty cool. So I think there's a lot of good things going on out there, literally at the grassroots of business that should be celebrated and applauded and supported. And then I think a lot of big businesses have been really forced to take a long, hard look at some of their forward plans and either put them on ice or completely rethink them in the current environment. So a lot of traditional bricks and mortar retailers have had to pivot very, very quickly to delivery and takeaway businesses, click and collect. And it's just been phenomenal to see how quickly that's happened with some successful businesses.
So Jen, I think that's really interesting that this market shock, this period of time that we've been in for the last 3 or so months, whilst it's created a lot of challenge for businesses, it's also created a lot of opportunity, which is what you've just been talking about there. If people can be nimble and pivot and be a little bit more creative in what they're thinking about. What I'm interested in is what do you think that the industry needs at this time, recognising that there's lots of individuals operating in marketing and advertising who haven't been through a market shock like this before? What sort of skills and traits and characteristics do individuals need to get through this and out the other side successfully?
Yeah, I think one of the first things I look for when I'm building a team or hiring someone is really resilience. So has someone been through a tough time before? Have they worked through a turnaround brand or a business? Have they had their back to the wall and have had to come out and find a new way of operating? Those are the kind of people that you want by your side in a time like this. You don't necessarily want people that are just going to jump ship at the first sign of trouble. You want people who dig in, who will work for the long term, and who will be there to help reshape the business going forward. I think, there's a lot of people out there that have only worked in good times or in businesses that have always grown double digits year on year on year. It really is a true test of a marketer in terms of being able to work through a business that's in decline or a brand that's in decline and turn things around. It forces you to rethink everything. It forces you to focus on the stuff that matters most. And it forces you to do things differently if you want to succeed.
What sort of skills are we talking about there, Jenni? When you talk about forcing people to change things up, what do you think is the key in terms of the capabilities beyond the culture?
Yeah, for me, the key capabilities, you really want relentless curiosity. You want the ability to think through situations from different perspectives and rephrase things very, very quickly. With reframing, you can often turn a problem into an opportunity very, very quickly, but you've got to be able to get out of the way that you're currently or used to doing things to look at things from a different perspective. For me, if you're always starting with the customer or the consumer, and that centricity and that single-minded focus on how you can help your customers and consumers solve a need, solve a problem, make their lives easier, you are always going to be on the right side of where you need to be from a business perspective.
I want to get back to very quickly, you mentioned creativity, Jenni. How do you think brands have been behaving in the market during COVID? What's your assessment on how they've been communicating, what they've been doing? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think having probably watched a little more TV than I normally do, and mainly kids' channels on in the house during the day at the moment, what I've seen is a lot of empty platitudes from brands, people telling me they're here for me and that we're all in this together. And they all look and feel the same, and they're just not connecting because I don't know what they're doing for me. I don't know how they're making my life easier as a customer or consumer. I don't know how they're solving a problem for me. They're just kind of talking at me in the TV, and it just feels like it's falling a little bit short. I think brands that are literally trying to solve problems and make consumers' lives easier in these times are doing really well, and they'll come out of it with more market share and a stronger brand and a better business model for it.
Jen, you are on the AANA board and also the board for Ad Standards. What do you want to see happen out the other side of COVID? What do you really want to see for the marketing and advertising industry here in Australia?
For me, and mainly speaking for client side, I think client side marketing, there probably hasn't been enough investment in people development and team development recently. I think we need to build the marketers for the future. Whether it's using new tech platforms or new skill sets or new ways of thinking, I think we've got to invest as an industry in smarter, sharper marketers that can drive meaningful business results. And for me, working on the client side in marketing roles, if you can't prove your business results of your marketing, then you're just constantly going to be challenged time and time again. And you'll be challenged on every budget and every decision you make. As soon as you can demonstrate those really strong commercial links to what you're doing as a marketer and the business results, everything gets a lot easier in every conversation with a CEO or a board or a CFO. And it just helps build positivity for marketing and further investment down the track.
Tell us a little bit more about that, Jen. Tell us about the, being pushed on decision making by the exec suite, so from CEOs or CFOs. How have you gone about that in prior roles in terms of, taking everybody on a journey and understanding the decisions that you are making as a very senior marketing lead in the industry?
Mm.
Yeah, it's a great question, Liana. And Jenni, maybe you could tell us an anecdote from the trenches, unnamed, of course, about how a learning where we could all go, aha, we get it.
Yeah. So I think first things, a lot of marketers like to speak in jargon. So it helps us shortcut communication with our agencies. It helps us talk to each other very, very quickly. It's amazing. But when you're talking to a non-marketer, you just sound like you're talking jargon or BS even. I think when you're talking to a CEO or a CFO or you're talking to your board, you've got to be talking in the language of business. You've got to be talking about how investing in this brand campaign or this new product launch or this media investment or sponsorship is going to drive a real hard business result that's going to impact P&L, it's going to impact market share, it's going to impact top-line revenue growth. It's going to help you reduce costs by shaping the way customers interact with your business, whether you're moving things more online and more digital. You've got to be able to speak the language of business to boards and CEOs to be successful. You've got to be able to speak the language of marketing to your agencies and your teams to make sure you can be successful. So I think it really is being able to shift gears between those two languages and communicate effectively with your key stakeholders.
Early in your career, I imagine marketing did have more of a business focus. Something's happened in the last couple of decades, or the last decade, where we got, as you say, into our own brand speak, into marketing speak, and not into business. What happened there? How did marketers end up falling into that trap?
I think it depends on the business. So if marketing is really the heart of your business and it's a key driver of growth and everyone believes in marketing's ability to drive the business forward, then you tend to have the right conversations. I think when I started back in FMCG back in the day, we all had P&L responsibility as assistant brand managers. So you just learnt from day one that you had to be able to navigate the P&L. You had to be able to navigate costs and revenue and understanding how you could pull those levers in a different way to make money for the business. I think at times now, marketing departments are communications departments. So they're there to make advertising and build trust or do a different job to driving business growth. And I think when you separate marketing from the center of the business growth engine, you will never get the best out of marketers and the best for the business.
So there's plenty of debate actually, Jen, around ROI and whether it's useful or not, and also what role it plays. What's your take on that whole area of fabulous debate?
For me, it's absolutely essential to marketing, and particularly to stakeholder engagement at senior levels with CEOs and CFOs. It is one very important tool to help you drive effectiveness and efficiency and make smarter decisions as a marketer. It is one tool. You also need to have amazing creative. You need to have amazing media efficiencies and strategy. You need to put those two things together to get the best outcomes. In my previous roles, we've been very, very focused on ROI. We've used some very smart partners to help us pull apart our marketing mix and understand our spend and what's working and what's not. And you just continually make investment decisions that make better outcomes happen. So, for example, what we found is that creative and media are literally as important in most businesses I've ever worked in driving the ROI outcome. So you get very, very focused on improving the quality of your creative. You get very, very focused on your media strategy and efficiencies and making sure you've got the right media plans. And the outcome of those two things can drive a really powerful impact to your business. So being able to prove that versus other investment opportunities at a board level is just so critical.
Well, you did some pretty interesting work, didn't you, with analytics partners around the role of creativity and its contribution. Creativity is a really tricky one because it's subjective, it's fuzzy, everyone's got a view, and it's not quite a media plan with X number of eyeballs watching a program on Nine, for instance. There you go, Liana. Thank you, no problem. That
Doing
creativity.
my job for me, Paul.
I know. Creativity, though, is a real tricky one for marketers and companies. So what did you learn from that 50%? It's around 50%, I think, of the impact, the return coming from creativity.
Yeah, and we saw that also as our biggest opportunity. So we'd seen improvements in our creative scores, in the response we were getting from consumers on creative. We had much better strategic and creative coherence and consistency along the way, which was giving us an exponential outcome at the other end. So we almost doubled our creative scores in 3 years. Which is amazing. And it just shows it can be done. You can measure creativity. You shouldn't use it as the only tool that you're using to define creativity, but it's a very useful business underpinning to talk about the work you're doing rather than just, hey, we made a great ad.
Jen, thank you so much for your time today. We've covered a lot of ground this morning, and I think there's been some really interesting topics talked about, not least of which is things like the customer's needs are really not negotiable, that creativity is important in absolutely everything that you do, not just your creative messaging from an advertising point of view, that growth and development and training of people is actually paramount because it's people that get businesses through. And obviously that marketing is a way to drive business results and grow a business, but it's really important as marketers to use business language to be able to communicate at a CEO and CFO level rather than that vanity brand language that can sometimes creep in. So again, Jen, thank you so very much for your time and for your insights this morning. Paul McIntyre, always a pleasure. For everybody who's joined us for Reset Now, we hope to see you again next week. Thanks so much and bye-bye.